Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cold Hard Truth Podcast. I'm Shrikar Rajendran.
I'm Jack Smith.
And I'm Anish Gupta.
And we got an interesting episode today. We are going to be going over the Houston Texans. The main question we want to answer here, are people overlooking the Texans? We're going to be taking a look basically at the state of what their franchise is looking like. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you like and subscribe and hit the bell so you're notified of future episodes. And if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you rate us 5 stars. But without further ado, let's get right into it. And if it's okay, I'd like to start with Bill O'Brien, the coach and the GM. I'll examine some of his personnel decisions later, but I kind of wanted to just dive into Bill O'Brien as a coach because, he's a good coach. And we all know what he did at Penn State after the scandal, and he just kind of righted the ship. And in Houston, he took over a 2-14 team. And he went 9-7 in his first year, and he barely missed the playoffs. If you're talking about a guy who makes the playoffs consistently, I think Bill O'Brien's your guy. And the only time that he hasn't had a winning record was the year Watson tore his ACL. But I'm going to talk about this a little bit, but O'Brien is great at getting his team to the playoffs, but staying in the playoffs and making a run, that's just a different story because he was 1-3 in the playoffs heading into last year. And the Texans, they got the win over the Bills. That's cool. But you're up 24-0 against the Chiefs, and we all know what happened. And I feel like people are just always going to doubt Bill O'Brien in the playoffs until Houston makes a run. And it's something that's always just going to be a mark against him. And we've seen good coaches get fired even though they were good at getting their teams to the playoffs. You think of Mike McCarthy, Andy Reid with the Eagles. That's just naming a couple. But at some point, you have to do some real damage in the postseason.
Jack, if it's cool with you, I'd kind of like to go on. Shrikar kind of touched on it. Bill O'Brien's a good coach. I think he's been a questionable GM to say the least. I think with the Texans, I said this last time in our Watson-Wentz debate. If you want to check that out, guys, I'll put it in the description. It's a really good episode. We kind of debated on Watson versus Wentz and just the outlook of them. But going back to that, I think my thing with the Texans is this. They have not ever made it past the divisional round. There's always been that barrier for certain teams, whether it's the Lions just making the playoffs or Browns getting a winning record or, the Rams overcoming something and finally winning a Super Bowl. Each team kind of has their barrier that they've been stuck by. Saints maybe finally reaching back there. But with the Texans, it's always been the division round. They have not been able to get past it. Wild card weekend, I think Texans have just owned really, dominated it most of the time. Even though they had to beat Connor Cook that one year with the Raiders. But I think with the Texans, I thought Deshaun Watson this year was going to do it. I picked them. You guys all know that. I thought that this was probably the year that they could upset him, and it was looking really good. I think, but that loss, I do have to put some on Deshaun Watson as well as a little bit on Bill O'Brien. I think the fake punt was kind of asinine. Why'd you have to do that? But kind of for the outlook for the Texans this year, right? Yes, Deandre Hopkins is gone. That is a big loss. But sure, they also lost DJ Reader. But people are kind of freaking out, acting like DeAndre Hopkins is this quote unquote savior who's going to win you all these games. Yes, he is a top 3 receiver. He is third, nothing more, nothing less. I think we can all agree there. I've seen people put him 2. I've even seen people put him 1, which I completely disagree with. So I hope Jack and Shrikar can agree with me there. Okay. He's third, nothing more, nothing less.
I put him at 3.
Yep. So also, I think people do a bit overrate him on that regard. He did have 1165 and 7 last year. That wasn't even top 3 in the AFC. But of course, we still give him his credit for his production over the course of his career, 2 1,500+ yard seasons. So yes, he is a very good player. But the loss, they keep in mind they have Brandon Cooks now, right? They got for I think they have to give up a 2nd-round pick. So they basically did DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson and Brandon Cooks. Not the best kind of pick, not the best kind of trade value, but it wasn't bad. I think David Johnson has shown he's made it first-team All-Pro season, 1,200 yards, 16 touchdowns. I still remember that year. While it has been a few years removed from that, I think he can still regain some of that form. He just needs to increase his yards per carry. I think that's where he's lacking. So get more runs, be more consistent on runs. Just don't look for the big plays. Brandon Cooks, who's had 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons. Last year was pretty bad. 14 games, 500 yards. That was pretty bad. But can only go up from there, and I think he'll get another chance. Will Fuller is still one of the best wide receiver twos out there. I'd argue he's a top 5 receiver two when healthy. And Randall Cobb, a great slot receiver. So I'll kind of pause my argument here and just say, look, Texans still have pieces, and they still have their star quarterback who had 33 total touchdowns and only 12 picks. So, Jack, if you want to take it from there, I think people are just overlooking what this team is still capable of.
This team was one crazy miracle comeback from the Chiefs away. From being in the AFC Championship game, they lose, a top 3 receiver, yes, but at a position that is one of the lesser important. When you have a great quarterback, they can make it work with anyone. Mm-hmm. And, losing DJ Reader on defense, one game removed from an AFC Championship game, and they lose 2 players, and now everyone just believes they're not going to be very good at all. I just think that, yes, people are overlooking the Texans a little bit, but I also think that could get to them because obviously the narrative has changed around the Texans losing that game to the Chiefs and then trading Deandre Hopkins. Seemingly everyone in the media and just in public does not believe in this team anymore and has just visibly shown that they do not think the Texans are good. And that I think that may get to them a little bit, but in a division that I think can be up for grabs, I think people are overlooking the Texans a little bit. Everyone has the Titans and the Colts firmly racing for that division. But, the Texans, again, one game away, one crazy comeback away from being in an AFC Championship game. And who knows? I think they could have beaten the Titans, possibly, if in the AFC Championship game. So it's really interesting to see all the people just kind of overlooking the Texans right now after losing really one player.
But here's what I'll say to that, though. The division did get better this year. I think the Colts got a lot better. I think Xavier Rhodes is an underrated signing. I know the roads were completely open last year, but can't ignore the fact that he was an All-Pro a couple of years ago. So I think he just needed a change of scenery. He'll do better. Colts obviously got DeForest Buckner, who I think is a stud. I know Shrikar knows how good he is. So that's a good piece. Obviously, Phillip Rivers, I think, can get the job done, even though I still don't believe he's a Hall of Famer. I think he still has the capabilities with a good offensive line around him. T.Y. Hilton is still great. I think give him a good quarterback and he'll do well. I think he's one of those receivers that needs a good quarterback, as we've seen throughout his career with Andrew Luck. So I think you give him Phillip Rivers, both of them will shine. Jack Doyle is still there. So Colts definitely got better. The Titans are if I were to give the third best team in the AFC award to any team, I think the Titans would be the front runner, probably Bills second. Obviously when you make it to the AFC Championship in that conference and you're not the Patriots, it's pretty impressive. So I think the Titans should be regarded, I don't know, as the favorites for that division. Is always tough, but then again, the Texans have won it the last 2 years. But yes, they've not looked good in the playoffs. They obviously choked the game to the Colts a couple years ago. I think with the Texans, it's just they kind of went from, in my opinion, a bit overrated to now a bit underrated. I think that's kind of how I look at it.
Colts are underrated for sure.
No, the Texans. But yeah, Colts are. Oh. But I think the Colts are right where they should be. But the Texans were. I think people were overrating them a bit. To now, I think people are sleeping on them. It's just what can I Because see, this question is so weird. Do I think they can get back to the playoffs? Yes, I think they can. The division is honestly open. Any team can really come out. I think it'll come down to the division games.
And we do know Bill O'Brien's track record, so, it's obviously possible.
It's not that. I think but it's also the Texans have played rather well in the division. And I think they finally got over the only person that was really keeping that division under lock was Andrew Luck when he was there. Because when he was there, I think he went 10-0 against his division counterparts at one point. So now he's gone, right? I don't think Phillip Rivers is going to do the same thing. I think the Texans, in terms of the divisional games, they have owned it. They have done well. In fact, final game of the season, I think it was for the division. I believe the Texans won it. Titans lost it, but they still made the wild card game. So if I were to say, who wins those divisional games, I would still pick the Texans. I think it just comes down to the non-divisional games. If the Titans have a better record, maybe they take it. Same thing with the Colts. But I think people are still underlooking the prowess of Deshaun Watson. I think he's only going to get better. He is borderline top 5, and I think he can establish himself, maybe even have an MVP-like year. I really don't know. We'll see.
I think my biggest complaint about the Hopkins trade was instead of a running back, the Texans really could have used more help on the offensive line. And they also needed a first-round pick, obviously. You trade a top 3 receiver, you don't get a first-round pick. It's like – and they got neither. Instead, you're settling for a veteran running back whose best days appear to be behind him. And, Melvin Gordon was a free agent. Todd Gurley was going to be available. Devontae Freeman, he's still on the market. You could have re-signed Carlos Hyde. He got 1,000 yards last year. I mean, I think all of those options may be better than Johnson at this point. You could have attacked the position in the draft, because that running back draft class, it was pretty deep. I think all of these options just look way better than trading DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson. So, I mean, that's just my biggest complaint about the trade.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the Texans, we've seen that tremendous quarterbacks can make the playoffs if their weapons are still a little bit depleted. We've seen Aaron Rodgers do it play well when Devontae Adams is hurt. We've seen Carson Wentz do it, leading a bunch of scrubs to the playoffs. And Deshaun Watson is in the conversation with both of those quarterbacks. I'd have him above both of them, and I know he disagrees with that specifically Wentz. But
he's top 5 or top 6.
No, I think I'd rank Watson above Wentz right now just because he's won a playoff game. I think just for the future, I'd take Wentz. Also, I'd put Rodgers above Watson just right now, like a smidge above. I'm honestly, but if you were to say he's better than Rodgers, I would listen to an argument about it.
But they're all in the same tier, and we've seen those two. I mean, even Brady to a certain extent, playing with not great weapons on the outside, and they can make the playoffs. And I think that Deshaun Watson, the weapons he has going into this year, better than what Rodgers has when Adams isn't around, better than what Wentz had last year, better than what Wentz probably even has this year. Mm-hmm. I think that you can't really overlook the fact he still has Will Fuller, Kenny Stills, Randall Cobb, Brandon Cooks now. Mm-hmm. Darren Fells is not a terrible tight end. And that offensive line, especially in the 2 tackle spots, has gotten better over the last couple of years with Laramie Tunsil. And people forget they drafted Titus Howard in the first round a year ago.
Yeah, that's a good point. I believe it was 23rd pick, something like that.
Yeah. So I think that we've seen that great quarterbacks can make the playoffs even if their weapons are depleted. And Deshaun Watson's weapons, while it's not just DeAndre Hopkins, I still think they may be top half of the league-ish, around there. And so I think that a player of his caliber can still make the playoffs with that.
Here's what I'll say to that, though. For David Johnson, I think maybe there's something we're not seeing because, yeah, you're right. There were so many options that could have been better than David Johnson.
Right.
Is he finally healthy? Did he do some stellar thing on his physical? Like, I don't know what – because he hasn't averaged 4 yards a carry the last 2 years. So something is not right. I believe he only got like less than 100 carries last year too. So what are they seeing that we're not? There's got to be something there. That's first what I'll say. But here's the thing, though. We can't – for the Texans, it's not a question of making the playoffs. I think if I'm a Texans fan, it's can I get past the divisional round? Because, look, the Texans have made the playoffs what? I think, Shrikar, you said it. Like, I think they made it four times.
4 out of the last 6 years, I'm pretty sure.
Exactly, right? So that's not the issue. And even then, the AFC South, like I said, it's still wide open. So I think they're definitely contenders for the division. For me, it's can they overcome the AFC divisional round? That is my bar for them. I would say, honestly, I know this is even with the loss of Hopkins, if they don't make it to the division round, actually, if they don't make it to the AFC Championship, I would look at it as a year where they didn't progress forward. I think that's how I would look. I know that's a high bar, especially because I don't think the Texans right now are even top 5 in the AFC. But again, I've seen them it seems like I see them in the divisional round every other year. Even with like Matt Schaub, I think they made it too. This team, it's like, and they have the pieces on defense too. Justin Reed, I'm telling you, I think he's going to become a top 10 safety. I think this is the year where he really establishes himself. I think that's another guy people are overlooking. J.J. Watt is still there. He still produces. Same thing with Whitney Merciless. Those guys are still 2 lethal pass rushers that people are overlooking.
They've got a great inside linebacker duo too. Bernard McKinney and Zach Cunningham. Really, they're great. And so this defense, I think, it also gets overlooked. The offensive line, I believe, gets overhated by a lot of people.
It'll get better.
And this defense gets overlooked by a lot of people. So the reason we wanted to record this episode is to kind of show people that the Texans are being slept on and are being overhated by, I think, a lot of people just because of that, the loss in the playoffs and trading DeAndre Hopkins. But this team isn't much different than the team they had last year. And I think people just overhate them, and that's why I kind of wanted to touch on this.
I do have a question. I have a question for you guys, though, because I was looking at their schedule. The first 3 weeks, that opening stretch,
brutal.
It's brutal. Yeah. At Kansas City versus Baltimore, at Pittsburgh. So if this team gets off to an 0-3 start, which,
well, I mean, Minnesota in week 4 is no slouch either.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's not very
– the NFC North. That's a tough division just throughout the year.
And if they don't get a win if they don't get a win in these early weeks, which, it's not very hard to imagine, that could have a snowball effect. So do you think this team is the one to rebound, or do you think they're just going to keep piling on losses?
It's a good question because actually they've done it before. They went 1-3, or I think 1-4, and they went 11-5 2 years ago. So They have shown they can do it, and they have shown they can switch it up. I think they're one of like 2 teams to do that, which I think is very impressive. So, but again, I think it goes back to this. Going into next year, it's not that the Texans got so much worse. It's that their counterparts got better. Colts got better. Titans got better. Bills got better. I think that's the tier that I would put them in, right? Steelers definitely get Big Ben back. They're also better. The Pats have Cam Newton. You can never count them out. The Browns also got better. I think those are the Broncos as well. Even the Chargers. I think that's the tier, right, that I'm putting the Texans in. I think you can agree with me there.
Sure.
I think there's around 6-7 teams fighting from 3 to 7, right? I think Chiefs and Ravens are just blow away favorites 1 and 2. But from 3 to 7, there are about 10 teams fighting for 4 spots. And I put the Texans there. And so 2 teams out of those 10 will make the divisional round. Can the Texans be one of them? And now, once they get there, can they pull off an upset, right? They've shown that they can hang in with the best, right, with the Chiefs. Can they do it? Can they do it and finish the job this time? And that all comes down to Deshaun Watson, because DeAndre Hopkins is not there anymore. I am counting on you, Deshaun Watson, number 4, right? This is what you're known for. You're known to play big in big games. I have seen you throw a game-winning touchdown pass in the national championship with 6 seconds left. I have seen you overcome tremendous things just with your feet and with your arm, right? I've seen him get kicked in the face and still throw a touchdown pass. That is what I need from you in this big game, right? And I know Jack doesn't like it when I bring up these games, but when I bring up playoff games for good players, that's where you go from good to great. That is where you go from great to spectacular. That is where you go from superstar to Hall of Fame. Those are the games in the NFL which truly define you. And unfortunately for the Texans, the loss to the Chiefs really put a big hit on them because, 24-0 and you lose 51-31. I don't think that is ever going to be replicated. That is just such a weird thing to happen. I mean, only Patrick Mahomes can do something like that. But still, I mean, that is just something that I think I will never see again. I actually turned off the TV when they were up 24-0. I was like, all right, let's go. I picked them. And then, dude, literally 10 minutes later, you blow that lead. I think that's a huge knock on just the Texans organization, just the whole divisional round barrier. So I think just an outlook on them, that is my expectation. AFC Championship, and I need a top 3 season from Deshaun Watson.
Yeah,
I think Jack can go.
There's no denying that the Texans are a great regular season team, and they've got a good roster, and they've got the pieces in place to make the playoffs. I think a lot of people are over hating them this offseason specifically. I mean, we hated their offseason that they had, but they're still a good team, and that roster didn't change a whole lot. And they were, I mean, like we said, one crazy comeback away from the AFC Championship game. So I think people are overlooking them, which is why I think I kind of wanted to do this episode. That being said, though, I do not think that they will make the AFC Championship game, but the fact that I'm seeing a lot of people having them not make the playoffs or not content for that division coming in third, I mean, this isn't an under 500 team. This isn't a not competing for the playoff team. So I think that I wanted to just mention it because people are overlooking them. I think they're still a good team. They're very similar to the team that they had last year. And while, yes, some other teams in the AFC did get better, this team did not get much worse.
So, yeah, Shrikar, keep going.
Oh, I was just going to say I'd agree with Anish's points and Jack's too. I mean, you got to get to the postseason for starters because O'Brien's a good coach and he's raised the bar in Houston, obviously. So anything less than a playoff berth is just unacceptable at this point, especially with Deshaun Watson at the helm. And then you got to make a run. Like, it took Houston a decade to have the franchise's first playoff berth. And a decade later, these expectations are being raised. Nobody's going to be thrilled just reaching the divisional round. Like, the Texans need to go to at least the conference title game. And it's not like we're trying to save Bill O'Brien's job or anything, but it's just to show that, like, we're getting closer to this ultimate goal. So that's all I wanted to say. What did you want to say, though?
Look, I think that is my best case. If I'm a Texans fan, that's what I want. But look, I mean, I'll throw this at you. Do you really think the Texans will win the division next year? Do you think they will, like, it's tough, but if I were to give them a record, I don't know. I'm hovering around. I think the whole window is 7-9 to 9-7. I think that is like, I mean, it's not even they're bad. It's just their counterparts are just a lot better. I think with the AFC, it's just you have those two teams, right? Do you know what I mean? And then it's just that tier 2 AFC team, AFC teams. It's just so many teams fighting there. And, at this point in time, who's going to take that next step, right? And I feel like the Texans took a bit of a step back while a lot of teams took a bit of a step forward, right? And how big of a loss will DeAndre Hopkins be? I think all three of us are saying, guys, let's pump the brakes. It's not the end of the world. But yes, it is still a marginal loss. But that's my point. How far will these teams take a step forward, and how far back of a step back will the Texans take? Or will they, will Deshaun Watson overcome it by so much and just, emerge as an MVP candidate and take this team to 11-5 and to the conference championship? That's also possible too. I think with the Texans, it's just people are taking one player and going crazy and berserk over it. I think the media needs to chill out about that, especially with a receiver. I think that is, yes, it is a nice to have, but it's not a must have. I think there's a difference there. I think receiver is not, honestly, on offense, I would put quarterback 1. I'd actually put offensive line 2. I'd put running back 3, and I'd put receiver 4.
Jack, any final comments?
I don't think like a star receiver is great. Obviously, you'd love to have one. But if you have a lot of 750-yard guys on your team, like, you can make it work with that. Like, especially if you're Deshaun Watson. And when you bring up AFC tiers, I think that the Texans are in tier 3. I've got tier 2 would be the Bills and the Titans. I think they separate themselves just a little bit from the other teams you've mentioned.
Yeah, that's fair.
But the rest of the teams you mentioned, I'd put in tier 3. Maybe, a couple of them removed. But I think that the Texans, they can be a playoff team. And I think that I'd say they will be a playoff team. It's hard to predict, obviously, because we don't really know what's going to happen. But I think a lot of teams are losing DeAndre Hopkins out of proportion and overhating this team. But that being said, I think their schedule is hard. And like we said, I mean, Kansas City, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Minnesota, Tennessee twice, Green Bay, Chicago, New England. Like, there are a lot of games that the Texans could lose. There are a lot of hard games they will play this year. And I guess the main question that we will see answered this year is, without DeAndre Hopkins, can Deshaun Watson salvage the Texans?
Yep. And you guys want to give a quick answer on that? What do you guys like? What would you say?
I'm saying wild card team.
Okay.
I'll say they. I'd
agree with that.
Around this year.
You know what?
It's.
If I would have. If you put a gun to my head and said bet right now would they make the playoffs, I would actually say no. But I think their ceiling is the division, obviously, like 3rd or 4th seed. Their floor is 9th or 10th. So I think it's just so hard to say. But yeah, can I see them 7th seed? Yeah, it's so hard to like. This is one of those. The AFC I'm telling you, from 3 to 7, you're gonna see some real shockers. Like it's from 3 to 7, you're gonna see just an absurd. Like, I really can't. I mean, it's gonna be so hard when we make our picks. I can't even do it, man. I can't even give it to you right now. But I will say this: Deshaun Watson will find a way. If out of those quarterbacks in that tier 3 list, Jack, that you're giving me,
yep,
Deshaun Watson is number 1. So
I think Deshaun Watson's the best player in that division, and especially at the most important position in the league.
Exactly. You know how quarterbacks are for me. So I think if I were to bet on any one of those guys, he'll find a way for me.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I'd say wild card, but I mean, obviously it's so unpredictable. And to kind of close this out, again, I like O'Brien as a coach. He's not afraid to take some risks in big games and big spots. As a GM, obviously, my thoughts on the Hopkins trade. But if I'm a Texans fan, I'd stay optimistic because, of course, winning or losing the offseason, it does not have an impact on how well you're going to do. I'll say that right now. And we've all enjoyed kind of teasing the Texans for this trade, but if Houston takes the AFC somehow, we're all going to be saying, hey, remember when everyone was just crushing Bill O'Brien for trading D-Hop? So I mean, we're going to see how it turns out. But we want to thank you guys for watching this episode. Of course, if you like it, make sure you like and subscribe and hit the bell so you're notified of future episodes. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you rate us 5 stars. Also, follow our socials. That's going to be in the description. Our website is in the description as well. Again, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.